Hello, this is Barry O'Connell, and we're going to talk a little bit about the political primaries today with Richard Deshay Elliott. Richard,
Hey Barry,
say hi.
thanks for having me. On July the 24th, the early calendar was set for the Democratic presidential primaries with the calendar meeting the following schedule. Give me one moment to bring this up. South Carolina is first, followed by Nevada, then New Hampshire, then New Mexico, then Michigan, and then Virginia. Those are the opening states. That is going to determine the next presidential primaries momentum. South Carolina was the opening state in the 2024 presidential primary. It's sticking around for this time, and it poses a unique scenario in the Democratic primary. Could black candidates get the top two slots in the Democratic presidential primary, which has never happened before?
Absolutely true. I think it's changes the dynamic of the field. We've had um, a situation um, where the Iowa caucus and then followed up by New Hampshire gives us two places, both in excess of 88% of the population is white, less than 3% of the population is black. And it gives us um, a leave it to beaver worldview that isn't appropriate to today.
Agreed. As part of the Clyburn deal with the DNC, as part of making sure that Southern black voters are well represented, in part by the lobbying work and advocacy of former Democratic Party chair Jamie Harrison. South Carolina going first poses a unique scenario wherein Vice President Kamala Harris, who is expected to run, could come in first, while Maryland Governor Wes Moore could potentially come in second. Some of the other potential candidates, be that Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, are not as well positioned and have not been doing the campaign work or the governing work in South Carolina in order to accrue support. Governor Moore was down in South Carolina supporting a candidate in a special election, supporting Mr. Johnson, the nominee for governor. And that is going to mean something to the voters there. You're one of them. What do you have to say?
Well, I don't think we can count J.D. Pritzker out of this whole thing.
Hmm.
Is it J.D. or J.B.? I get him confused with Vance. Um,
JB.
J.B. That's it. Okay. He's been down here quite a bit, and he sort of wanders around the countryside giving away money, and that makes him very, very popular. He's got a lot of money, and to have a billionaire running for president who likes to give away money is a interesting phenomena. Um, the hairspray candidate, the fellow from California, um, what's his name?
Newsom.
Yeah, yeah, Gavin Newsom. He's been down here campaigning a lot. Um, People are excited about Westmore. People in South Carolina like him. Um, and it will be interesting to see, since he's been down here campaigning, if Vice President Harris is going to be able to catch up.
What I have explained to a few people is some people might come down and campaign in South Carolina. Vice President Harris governed for South Carolina for 4 years. That means something to quite a few people. During that time, she undoubtedly was able to meet quite a few local leaders, was able to develop her own relationship with Clyburn. If I were to predict, I believe that Clyburn is going to support Harris because she is the presumptive front runner. She is in the lead with basically every subcategory of voters, which I'll break down in a moment. And she is in a position to run and support Democrats down ballot. what is in the background of all of this? The Democratic National Committee has no money, put up their headquarters as collateral against a loan. There is no money. They are going to be very reliant on the people at the top of the ticket to throw money towards the national efforts and national apparatus. And while I was critical of this in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton campaign, I think that it is going to be a positive in the upcoming campaign because of the amount of momentum behind the Democratic Party.
Let's hope that let's hope that momentum holds out. I think basically what it comes down to is um, the Democratic Party is under assault by the forces of evil. I think it comes down to we never should have trusted the Democratic Party to Ken Martin. You just can't trust progressives. You have to go with a centrist, moderate, mainline Democrat, and instead we go with somebody who blows all the money and then puts us deeply in debt. We're in a bad situation.
Allow me to talk about some of the polling. So, this is polling that was conducted from July 27th to the 29th of 1,338 likely voters. Among Black Democrats, 49% for Harris, 8% for Newsom, 5% for AOC, 3% for Buttigieg. For white Democrats, 22% for Harris, 16 Newsom, 9 Buttigieg, 8 AOC. Hispanic Democrats, Harris 37, AOC 13, Newsom 13, Buttigieg 5. Asian Democrats, Harris 34, Newsom 15, Buttigieg 10, AOC 8. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. Democratic Socialists, Harris 35, Newsom 15, AOC 9, Buttigieg 8. And voters 18 to 29, of which there admittedly are not very many in the Democratic Party. Harris 43, AOC 11, Newsom 10, Buttigieg 5. Harris has a commanding lead among virtually every subcategory of voters within the Democratic primary, but in particular among Black voters and among progressive voters.
I think it's too early to say. Besides, we don't know whether Wes Moore is going to run. And if he does, we don't know how he's going to do. I think we need to sit back and sleep on Harris until we know what Moore is up to. He's the real future of the Democratic Party.
Well, if he is aiming to run, him and his team should listen to the following point. You do not necessarily win president just by winning states. You win president by delegate math. In many states, a 15% threshold in a given congressional district is the necessary math in order to get delegates from a particular legislative district. So, for example, if Governor Moore were to run for president, he would need to have slates of delegates in all the different congressional districts in South Carolina and try to see the areas where he thinks he'd get 15%, the areas where he'd get 30%, and if possible, the areas where he can get 45%. If there's an area where there's no way of getting to 15%, I would honestly argue it probably should be abandoned. And if there's a place where that 30 can be turned into 45, it makes sense to reinforce. You have to get the certain percentage in order to get the delegates. Otherwise, there's nothing to take to the convention. The Democratic nomination is chosen by the delegates from each individual state, and it is essential to start to chart a map of the states where his team thinks they would be able to get at least 15% in at least one congressional district. I think that Governor Moore could potentially do well in the Nevada congressional district that is north of Vegas, not the one in the city that is largely going to be driven by the Culinary Union, but the more rural northern Nevada district, where I think that having charisma and being able to get out and meet with a lot of people is very important. There have not been very many retail campaigns that went very far in the presidential cycle. John F. Kennedy in 1960 is sort of an example. Obama in 2008 is a good example. But there have not been very many where that's been the strategy. With Trump, it's been, most a media and big speech sort of strategy. And with Biden or with Harris, it was a lot of it was just Democratic Party infrastructure more so than anything else. So for somebody to run a retail style campaign in South Carolina or in rural Nevada or in rural New Mexico or in Detroit, it could be very meaningful in shifting the primary.
I think it could.
And And to add to the advantage of what you're talking about, what is the momentum state in this cycle? It's Virginia. Virginia is the state before Super Tuesday. Observers will note that Biden was actually doing fairly poorly until South Carolina, and then he used momentum from that to go into Super Tuesday. If Wes Moore is able to perform well in Virginia, which is the sixth final early state, he could potentially push that into doing well in states like Delaware, North Carolina, Virginia. I would even say to performing, in the deep South, like in the Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas states.
One can certainly hope. We I don't want to lose again, and that's a real concern for me. I want a candidate who's a winner, not somebody who chokes on the blue wall. And that's why I want somebody new, somebody who's going to make a difference.
Well, I think that Vice President Harris has a lot of advantages both in the map and in her advantage among basically every constituency. But as has been said many times before, the primary can change at any given moment. She could decide that she does not want to run. Um, she could have a very 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 bad performance in South Carolina where it's sort of a Lyndon Johnson 1968 moment and it pushes her out of the race. I don't expect this, but it is distinctly possible. And in a world where Governor Moore is going to have the time and resources to deploy very serious energy into South Carolina and into Virginia, which are the two most important states in the upcoming calendar. The other ones are important, but they do not provide the same level of momentum as South Carolina and Virginia individually do.
Well, then I guess the only thing for me to do is to run for delegate in South Carolina and do everything I can to get the best possible presidential candidate.
Absolutely. As a South Carolina resident, as a South Carolina Democrat, you as a potential delegate are a very meaningful opening organizing force where different presidential candidates should be courting you, should be trying to inquire of what you believe the needs of the people are and of what the necessary strategies are to win. And I think having a primary that is not necessarily a coronation but where several Democratic candidates of interest are able to talk about their visions for the future, I think that's a good thing. And I think that Governor Moore is uniquely situated to run a very aggressive retail campaign in a few different areas where there have not been aggressive retail campaigns, in my lifetime.
So you see him as the new John Kennedy.
I see him as a person who enjoys shaking hands, talking to people one on one, that specializes in that art form of politics, and that has nobody else in the race that will be able to do that as well as him. And in my opinion, when you have a unique structural advantage in the type of campaign you can run, you should. Kamala Harris, I think, is a wonderful person, but to say that I believe that she would run a door-to-door campaign in South Carolina, I wouldn't even say that it necessarily makes sense for her to do that. I would say to sort of the advice of Mr. O'Connell, that if I'm Kamala Harris, I would dedicate quite a bit, even of my primary campaign, to Georgia, to Pennsylvania, to North Carolina, to Michigan, to Wisconsin. I would focus on those states, even from the primary process, because those are the states Democrats need to win. And when I believe that Vice President Harris is in such a strong position that she's going to be the nominee, I think it makes sense to focus on those states in particular. Right now, there would be a contested fight to the convention with sort of the breakdown of the different candidates. But Harris has the ability to raise so much more money than any other candidate. It is a factorial. Anybody else is a percentage of what she could theoretically raise. And the campaign writes itself. I mean, here's a commercial I told somebody else earlier. In order to do an effective Harris for President commercial, especially in the general, all you have to do is show a child watching news headlines of the past several years of the lettuce diarrhea, of the ICE detentions, of the ICE murders, of the declining air and water quality, of the rising food prices. There have been so many things that have happened that you can simply put a child watching them and have the commercial be, yesterday was not good, but tomorrow can be and will be better.
I it's an interesting idea. The thing that would concern me is that we'd have to look at what she accomplished during the Biden 4 years. And it went before the nation. And they took a look and they weighed her and they measured her and they found her wanting. And she was turned down for president. Now, maybe she could do a Richard Nixon, but I'm not sure I see it. Um,
The
I would rather
structure,
go with somebody fresh without all the baggage that she carries.
well, you say that somebody fresh without any baggage, but I think that others would say that'd be a person who, as of yet, has not really been vetted. I'd say for all of the other candidates, they have negatives that will be new to them and not to others. To quote Edwin Edwards, everything negative that can be said about me has been said, but all these other people, you hear negative stuff about them and they don't look so good anymore. For Pete Buttigieg, whether that be his record as mayor of South Bend and just his general political inexperience and lack of preparation for the governor or for the presidency relative to basically every other candidate that's been successful. For Gavin Newsom, his opposition to the billionaire tax, his inability to address homelessness in California, and the fact that he was married to somebody who is now a member of the Trump family. For Shapiro appointing a anti-trans person to the Civil Rights Commission in the state, and not only supporting Israel's ongoing efforts, but literally serving in the IDF. For all these people, there are negatives of them that will be fresh and important for some sector of the populace, and that when they are attacked for it, it's going to hurt their ability to raise money. Kamala will be able to raise money regardless of what people hit her with. And that's maybe the biggest factor aside from her solid, rock solid support in the black community. Kamala Harris is a
Oh, for goodness
unifying.
sakes, Richard, take a breath, relax a second.
Mhm.
You're on this long diatribe of this woman who has failed us before, this woman who came before America and was rejected, this woman who has been measured, weighed, and found wanting, and instead you're ignoring the fact that nobody has been vetted as closely as Westmore by David Smith and the team at the Baltimore Sun, Fox 45, and that foolish news service that they have. They spend all day long, every day, teams of reporters trying to find something bad about him. And yet they constantly fail. Why? Because Wes is the right guy. It just, I know you have this unnatural desire. Well, you're young, you'll figure it out. But you've fallen in love with Kamala Harris, and I don't think she's the right one for America.
If Westmore decides to exert serious effort on the retail campaigning, on developing a delegate map, and on finding his states of concentration and his states of non-importance. New Hampshire, for example, Governor Moore is still at 0% in New Hampshire, and that is a difficult state to break through. Even Obama did not do well in New Hampshire. So there's a few states that I think are just not going to work well for him, particularly states that have very low black populations, a lot of the plain states, and a lot of New England. I don't think he'll do well. But then you take, for example, New York. He has roots in New York to a degree. He might have a much better ability to conduct a campaign there than I could currently project. So he has a very compelling candidacy. The leave no one behind candidate talking about rebuilding America could be a very compelling vision. And there is a world where Clyburn decides to support him in the opening state. That is a distinct possibility that cannot be counted out.
One of the things you're not adding into this discussion at all, which I think is important, is that the vice president, what's her name, has a boring white husband who was no real measurable help in the campaign. I mean, he existed, and that was about all he did. On the other hand, Governor Moore has got Dawn Fife Moore, who is an outstanding woman. And that is his secret weapon, I think. That gives him a power that nobody else has got a spouse anywhere close to her.
And she could absolutely be a helpful and useful surrogate. She could absolutely help him to campaign in the places where I would be concentrating to campaign as him. I would be concentrating specifically in Detroit, Michigan, in northern Nevada to try and get some of the congressional delegation votes there, in Virginia, especially in Norfolk and Newport News, along with in Northern Virginia. And in South Carolina, I would be going incredibly hard in the Clyburn areas in order to convince him that he should be the nominee. I think that there is a pathway for West to do very well and for him to do, at worst, to have the second most delegates. When Newsom is running in California, has so many delegate votes. West potentially having the second most delegates could be very serious. I believe, as things currently stand, that Vice President Harris should be able to win every state in a smile from Delaware to Louisiana. The only person who has the potential to disrupt that momentum is Wes Moore. Gavin Newsom is not going to win South Carolina. Neither is Pete Buttigieg. Neither is Pritzker. There is no universe where any of those happen.
It's going to be interesting to see.
Uh, I appreciate the question. Is there anything else you'd like to ask before we end the segment?
Not really. I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And again, I want to reiterate the opening calendar for the election, which is South Carolina, January 22nd, 2028, with Nevada the week after, New Hampshire the week after, New Mexico the week after, Michigan the week after, and Virginia the week after. It's going to be an exciting schedule. Thank you so much, Mr. O'Connell.
Take care, Richard. Good talking with you. Good
Thank you.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And we're off.